Hello and welcome back to the development of the Feersum scheme compiler. So in the last stream we started work on trying to split out the compiler and the standard library stuff into two. The idea is that we want to start being able to write more of the standard library in Scheme rather than in .NET at the moment. So most of the standard library at the moment is written like this, where we have .NET classes, and each class has a little like library name attribute, and then these built-in attributes that export a specific method so that you can import them in Scheme and use them. But what we want is we want to use the fact that we can now call our compiler from MS Build to be able to define a Scheme project and use and include all of our compile items like this, and then write the library like this in Scheme. So this is an example of the CXR library. The problem we have is because we need our compiler to be able to be built to be able to build this library, we can't then have our compiler depend on this library to make these types available at runtime, which is a bit of a shame. So in the last stream, we got sidetracked from the main mission, which is splitting these two things apart, and actually ended up working on the stuff in this runtime. So when we do a standalone compilation, our libraries and our like assets that we end up producing, I'm just going to run the test so that we end up with some in the output folder, have like are linked to our core library. And if you don't have that library in the right folder, you won't be able to run them. So what we've been doing is generating a runtime config and deps file. So we spent the most of the last stream wrangling with the Microsoft Extensions Dependency Model library to be able to correctly generate a deps file. So we don't have to copy libraries around all over the place if you're just doing like one-shot compilations. Obviously, for more complex cases, we'd prefer that you just use the SDK and let MS Build do all the copying. So it doesn't matter that it's a little bit hacky. But since the last stream, I've now refactored the runtime options that go into the main runtime config file. So we're not just using string templating anymore. We're actually serializing that as JSON. As soon as we have JSON now, we have system text JSON, so we're using that. And that's about it. So the plan for this stream is the compiler. If we ignore the SDK and templates, we have the standard library, the core library, and the Feersum compiler. And if I go in, why is that not working? Is it? The terminal shortcut, Control and backtick. They've changed the shortcut. Control and backtick. I mean, it makes more sense, but also they've changed it. If I was to go into the compiler at the moment, cd source Feersum, and then do .NET add reference to .NET add reference to Feersum core. So I'd try and then went to try and build this. I think this would fail because there is a circular dependency in the target dependency graph involving, and it doesn't really matter what the target is, but generally MS Build isn't happy if you try and have one library that depends on something that depends on it. If we have a look in our Feersum FS Proj directly, it doesn't reference, we reference core, we don't see the core referencing back to the compiler, but we've got this use local compiler props file, which is setting the Feersum compiler path and then using our SDK. So it doesn't actually depend on the compiler at runtime, but it does need it at build time. And so there's still a chicken and egg problem there. So the plan is that most of our project here is actually the compiler. There's also a small amount that is the runtime, the program. So we've got things like the REPL and command line parsing. So the plan is, oh, what's going on here? That's very interesting. Is Ionide getting very confused? That's going to flash for the rest of the time. Interesting. So we don't need the REPL to be able to compile our core library. So there's some bits of this that we can get rid of. And we probably don't need the whole command line options parsing. But we do want a little bit of the kind of compiler driver part of this. So what I'm going to do is create a new F# project. And can I do that here? F# new project. Yes, please. And I want it to be a class library. And we want to call it Feersum compiler services. Now what happens? Have you made anything? I've never used Ionide to generate projects before, so we should undo that for the time being. Oh, okay, it's generated it right up here at the top. So if I move that whole thing into the source folder, we've now got Feersum compiler services, and we can just move this piece by piece. So I'll get rid of the existing stuff that's in here. And then we'll go and add a reference. So if I go to, oh no, we're in the right place already, aren't we? Yeah. So if I now do add reference Feersum compiler services, should be okay, unless it doesn't like the fact that project's empty. No? Seems okay. Right. So what we can start doing is just moving bits of the compiler in there. Probably makes sense to do it in the order that they're declared in here. So if I move ice into here, and then if I move ice into the Feersum compiler services, why would you choose license over ice.fs? What is going on We redo these namespaces so that we can start actually using this as a library. Some of these references to ICE are going to need to be updated. Places where we actually throw these compiler errors will need their namespace imports opener for this new namespace. We can also take this as an opportunity to refactor some of the libraries as well, because I have, since I started writing this compiler, I've learned a little bit about F#, which apparently you generally shouldn't. This is an example here. You shouldn't really have modules as the root of the file. You should have a namespace, and then you should have your types in the namespace, and then the methods in a module. Because I mean, it doesn't really make any difference from F#, but when you look at it from other languages, I mean, the runtime deals with it. Each module ends up being a class, whereas so then like these types, like global type here, is actually like it's a nested type, which is a bit nasty. So it'd be nicer if you just had a namespace called like Feersum compiler services binding, and then inside that there was a type called global type storage ref, rather than there being just an in the root namespace a class called bind with a subclass or nested type, not subclass. So anyway, every time we do open ICE, I want it to be open compiler. Why am I doing this manually when I'm so notorious for my spelling? Does that build now? I also feel like probably should be keeping track of these changes as we go, staging it bit by bit. See, it wasn't even. It wasn't. If I do own space, I really meant open. Does that build? So you got the binder, we've got built-ins, compiler, moving it from one place, adding it to another. So hopefully it should, yeah, it's picked that up as a rename. Good. Got the lower and the macros. So onwards. To Feersum again. Options. So options, I think, is our comp. Oh no, utils. What's in utils? Do we need to move this? Yes. So this is just generally useful things. Just stopping to wonder whether or not any of this should be auto open actually. So in F# you can mark modules as auto open, and then if you've imported the names, if you've opened the namespace, then all of the methods in the module will just appear. I think we might end up using that to make some of the refactoring with a binding nicer, whereas showing that we've got modules that we shouldn't really have. But for this, I think I think this is okay because you want to do like result EX is okay. And can I actually just get away with calling this result? Cached type check results not yet available. Well, what is the problem here? It looks like Ironide is having a day, which is suboptimal. Refresh Explorer. Clear project cache. Well, that failed, so yeah. Let's do change workspace or solution and see whether or not. Ah, that's a good point. Thinking of this, I haven't actually added the new projects to a solution yet. So if I add the compiler services, solution file, no. That looks better. Are you happier now? Still says cached type checks. It's probably not what I asked you to do. So yeah, we've got the new project added to the solution. And let's just discard those changes. Let's try reopening the solution again. So in the Ironide menu, change workspace. So there's a directory with 5 projects, or a directory with 3 projects. That's the 3 projects are going to be the ones it's found that are F# projects. So they'll be the tests. Could you stop glitching out? Apparently not. Is that better? I mean, it's difficult to tell. It's still not really doing anything for this Feersum compiler services project that we've just added. That should have the new, should have the ice. See, ice. Why is ice still being listed there? Yeah, I'm not sure about this. Let's build it again. And let's change back to viewing the solution. I mean, it's there, it's listed, it builds. Failed to load. I wonder about if we can track down which one is the ionide. There we go. So that's F# autocomplete, which is the actual language service. If we just kill this, nope. That one, no. That one. What's happened now? It's restarted ionide. Refresh Explorer. I don't understand what the little orange thing means. But it isn't in here anymore. You don't need to open that file. Right, let's get out and restart the whole thing. Maybe. Well, the file's in the right place now. That was a fun sidetrack. So yes, utils, we do want them to be in the other place as well. So we'll put them, put utils in here and copy the file, which we can just Control X and Control V. Yeah. Compiler services dot utils. Is there a better name for this? Apparently not. We'll just open utils and replace that with some compiler services utils, and that. Yes. How do I just? Is there? There's got to be a shortcut for this. Control. Oh, it's Control Alt and Enter. Okay. Don't know why you're giving me that much warning about the fact I'm about to just do some replacements. Meeple one says, in the most recent CS Proj versions, the default is to compile any CS files existing and exclude those you do not want. So yes, F# works differently. So what you're talking about there is a feature called default compile items, and yeah, it looks like there's a whole bunch of shortcuts, Meeple, which are different between macOS, which is where I generally program for work, and Linux, where I generally just fumble around. I did spend all the time like customizing my Emacs config, so that works the same way across like Windows, Linux, and Mac. But yeah, I've not really got there with VS Code yet. I just fumble. Yeah, so default compile items is a thing for C sharp. So if we have a look at the C sharp components here, yeah, there's nothing in here that says which files to compile. But in F sharp, the order that these files are compiled in matters. So if you just leave it to default compile items, your compiler gets things in the order that the underlying operating system returns them. So that could be like alphabetical, could be like the order that they were added to the folder. Yeah, it could even like change from day to day, which isn't necessarily what you want. So in F sharp, the default compile items are disabled and you have to manually add the compiles, which, yeah, I mean, you just have to live with it. We've actually done the same thing in our SDK as well. So in our SDK, in the targets file, I think it's in here, we have enabled default compile items set to false, so that when you create a new scheme project, those also have, let's go find an example, multi-file like this. We also have compile items just like this, because in the same way, if we wanted something to be able to depend on, like this file here, main, depends on the library defined here, so we need this to be defined first. Whereas C sharp doesn't mind about ordering, because it just scans through all the files and then gets all the definitions and then compiles the bodies, which, yeah, isn't what we do. It's just easier. So I was going to see whether or not I can rename result ex. Not experiencing F sharp, but it is a generally good language. I'm enjoying it. It also says, yeah, CS doesn't care about order. Yeah, it's a property called mutual recursion, where things that you define don't have to come in the order that you use them. Whereas like in C doesn't necessarily. I think this is right. C doesn't support mutual recursion. So if you wanted to have two functions, one of which calls the other, you need to make a declaration ahead of time about the existence of at least one of those functions, so that you can compile them, because C just like walks through the file effectively, declaration by declaration, and compiles them, which is the reason why you have header files, because effectively what you do is you put all of your declarations in the header file, and then everyone sees them all. But obviously that's a bit of a pain. Although saying that, F sharp has interface files, which I think is something that came from ML, where you can do the same kind of thing, where you write a declaration saying, here are the things that are public in my, I don't know, utils module, for example. I could write an interface file that says result ex has this function and this function, and then I don't know whether or not the compiler uses that for optimization, like it doesn't need to read the bodies to be able to get the declarations, or I don't know. I think it's just done for cleanliness sort of thing. Utils, the namespace utils. But I thought we updated those. Oh, I know what it is. It's casing. Restart. Well, it seems happier about that whole thing. Let's stage the whole lot. What's next? No. Options. Yeah, as I say, options is the compilation. No, yeah, this is the compilation option. So this is like a library type. Can I do a rename like this? That seems like it would be less error prone. Right. Miguel says, I was planning on spending my Saturday wasting away in Minecraft. But you've got me inspired to start VS and take a look at my OpenGL project. Cool. What are you doing with OpenGL? I had to use OpenGL for one of the projects for at uni. We had a module on computer graphics and we had to do like raw OpenGL. But that was back before like the new like shader driven model, so it was all like GL vertex buffers and that kind of stuff. I remember I wrote an importer for some model file format so that I could make things in Blender and then export them. I basically just went through all of the different types that Blender could export to, and like one by one went and exported it, and then opened the file up in a text editor to see whether or not I reckoned I could parse it until I found one that looks like reasonably simple enough. Probably wavefront files. Maybe, yeah. Are they like text-based things? I seem to remember, yeah, you had like V's and then it had all the vertices and the F's, yeah, with the list of the faces, and they were the indices into the vertex array. Sounds like it, Meatball. So, yeah. Now I've renamed that. That was far nicer. This might go slightly faster. We need to cut this, paste it down here, and then go find the declaration and paste that down here and make sure everything's in the right order. And now everything should still compile. Diagnostics. Yeah. We're going to need those. This depends on F parsec as well, so you'll probably want to move the reference to F parsec. I really get annoyed by the fact that you get moved to the diff view and then you can't edit things in the diff view if it's a stage change, but you can if it's... I'd rather just always get taken to the file. I don't know if that's something that you can... He says doing exactly the same thing. No property group. It's early. And then if that worked, we wanted to take the diagnostics, move that over. God damn it. Stop doing it from the diff view. Yeah. This view looks like trash. Mainly because it's complaining about all of the things that just don't kind of work. What a shame. And then, with any luck, we can just do Feersum compiler services dot, and then I guess it's going to be diagnostics. I'm trying to decide what namespaces all of these things should go into. We've created, like, we've got 4 different files, and we've got 4 different namespaces so far. I'll have a think. Oh, cache type check result not available. So you gave me the pop-up so that I could rename it, but then didn't allow me to. Oh, shift enter to preview, eh? Let's see. Oh, okay, again, whatever. Let's do it this old-fashioned way then. Open diagnostics with that. And then it was Control Alt Enter. Oh, I see why we don't have cache type check results. It's because I've messed this up. So this one needs to be an item group. It really is early. It's not early. It's just a Saturday. What are you upset about? REPL? That's probably a knock-on error from somewhere else, isn't it? Has errors is not defined. Where is diagnostics? Has errors defined? Maybe we want there to be a module. Or see, the thing was they were implicitly calling the names the method by the namespace. We could do that. And then that would bring it into scope, maybe? And then I guess we want to do the same thing here. I mean, it kind of makes sense that if we're going to have We could make this an auto open module. Yes. Make this a namespace. We can do let private module. Oh, it's module private. And then we can do this as internals that. Oh, we can also make that auto open. That. Surely that should. Oh no, that needs to be like that. Because it can't be private inside the private module, otherwise no one at all can see it. Then we can make this an auto open module called just diagnostics. And put all of our public methods in there. That. Does that now build? It does. We've actually made something better as well along the lines. Some things aren't happy. Yeah, let's just go through them one by one. So that seems okay. Built-ins. Does diagnostics have error? Do we want that module to be auto open or not? I mean, that doesn't look the worst. Has errors is not defined, but we just imported diagnostics. Yeah, you are fine with it. Okay. Compile is yes. Okay, so we want to. If we do that, then we can do open diagnostics like that. That should be happier. Mainly because like all these things like text locations and the diagnostics type, they're all like private, or they're all in that other module. Still not happy. Why are you not happy? All branches if what? Because you don't know what is result. Result is compile result. Diagnostics, because that should just be diagnostic list. Sometimes you have to trace back the error to the source because you've got like this cascade of poorly compiled stuff. Well, that's fewer errors. Text location. Actually, having just text location at the root is quite nice. You're not happy because you want that. Well, I mean, I think we've compiled that bit now, so good. But why is there still some... Whatever. Stage it all. Then next up. Actually, let's have a think. Because do we want the location part of this in its own place? Does any... Like, we use the missing position in the text location class, but we don't use it anywhere else. And locations have a meaning outside of just diagnostics. Maybe one for another day. Let's try and just get this moved. So syntax. This is where we do all the parsing. We've already moved fparsec over. Syntax is a module. So let's move it and then rename things. So it's easier to move it from here, isn't it? If I copy, paste, then copy, paste. That's all worked. So let's change this to namespace Feersum compiler services. Syntax. And then, so we've got our type. So we've got syntax constant, AST nodes and that kind of thing. And I think everything else wants to be module. And do we want to call this parse? I mean, it is effectively the parse of this bit. It's just a bunch of we could change this. So this is a private module containing just make it an auto module. That's probably the quickest way back to being compilable. Module parse, and then take all of this, indent it one. Now, you're not unhappy. We need to open compiler services syntax to get that. Now you're happy. You're going to be happy for the same reason. starting to get to the point where most of the namespace imports are actually already moved over. Interesting. You import targets but don't use it. Really? Type AST node. Yeah, well. Let's see. Can we find syntax again? I think what we probably want to do, if this compiles, is make that module with the parser in it not auto open. And then you'd have to explicitly call parse.read expression, parse.parse file. Or open parse directly. Yeah. What breaks if you make it not auto open? So I don't think it's going to be that much. Brace to be wrong, right? Not much. Built-ins. Here we want to do parse. And we already have syntax in, so that should be fine. In the compiler, we want to do parse file. But we don't have... Wow, look at the size of this thing. We do have syntax. Okay. Okay, that's just an old error. And then read expression wants to be parse.read expression. You have syntax in scope. Nice. Stage it. Oh, no. No, not nice. What's gone wrong here? The tests. So... The namespace syntax is not defined. See, I don't think that's really what you're complaining about. I think you're complaining about that. Is it? So surely that will fix it. Most of them seem to be in that syntax tests, which kind of... What else have I changed in that tests folder by accident? Diagnostics test is happy. Eval tests. It needs to use... See, syntax utils is the tests, like utility module for building up syntax trees. And I did a bad rename, didn't I? Overmatched. Same thing for syntax factory. Although there's probably some part of syntax factory that could be moved into the main compiler library itself, because it's basically just a way of... I've done that one wrong as well, because what I really wanted was... because these aren't in the same order. There's probably a fair amount of the syntax factory that would be useful outside of tests, because it's for building up syntax trees. Syntax utils again. And this syntax test we've already fixed up. And then this actually wants to be... Oh, that looks like it should work. Not sure how many of these errors are out of date. Not all of them, apparently. You really are adamant that that namespace is not defined. I mean, we could just open parse as well, couldn't we? Just like we used to. Might need that in the eval tests as well. Yeah. We're getting there though. Syntax utils. One error. And just because we've moved namespaces, let's rerun the test just to make sure. Looks positive. What's next? Libraries. So libraries is... should be a namespace. That's my way in here. This it should be namespace. And then that has all of our types in it. And then we can make all this private stuff. We make all the private stuff into an auto open internal module. Yeah. Right down to there. And then we need to get rid of all these privates here. Can I? Yeah, that's probably the easiest way. And then these want to be module libraries so that we can export them. And we can get rid of all the publics from there, let's. What's that going to have broken though? Probably only. I was going to say only the binder, but yeah, the built-ins library also deals with the libraries. So instead of that, we could just use open the interface, open. And we can get rid of libraries dot all over the place and just use the types directly. I mean, it is nicer. This is one of those cases where just having the excuse to do it because you're in there already moving everything around. We are hopefully cleaning the code up as we go. The rest of these should... The rest of these, like, red squiggles should hopefully solve themselves when we next compile. Because I think they're all cascades from the original error. What about built-ins? Yeah, built-ins probably wants to do compiler services. That's going to bring the libraries type in. Yeah, it will be defined now. Will be defined. Yeah. Question is that going to break any tests or anything? Running pretty low on the uptime usual. So Kind of looks like it is. All of those are from the built-in, so I guess I just typoed it on the import. Maybe there are some tests. Well, I mean, everything compiles now, so you can get rid of those squiggles. Alright. What about auto open on this? Yeah, we'll leave that for the time being. Well, actually, no. Let's take away the auto open and find out how much it breaks. Not that much. So, and then this one here as well. All in the binder. Will it break the tests though? If it breaks a whole load of the tests, I might just back it out and leave it as auto open. Yeah, I'll leave it as auto open. The opposite of auto open is you can actually have libraries. You can actually mark it as require qualified access. So you can force people to use the name of. So you wouldn't be able to even like do open libraries. You could do require qualified access, which I guess is kind of useful for some things. I'm thinking specifically for some of our syntax tree types have error labels on them. And it causes a right pain because like you'll end up with, let's go find an example result. Utils. So in here we can do okay or error because everything's fine. But in some places, like in the binder, for example, where we've got all of the syntax tree in scope, we have to do like results.error instead. Whereas it might be nicer rather than in. We need to do this here not because result error isn't in scope, it is, but because we also have a bound expression error. But it might be nicer to have like require qualified access on bound expression like this. And then we'd be able to is this even going to compile? I mean, if this just worked, no. Okay. Yeah. Then you would be able to remove it from the result. Anyway, that was a sidetrack. Macros. Let's get rid of that because I'm fed up with the like diff windows getting in the way. So macros. Copy, paste. I say copy, I mean cut. Because we don't want it in the old place. I'm starting to wonder whether or not things like macros and libraries should be in a namespace like binding, because these are all used by the binder. So like the libraries one is used to parse library declarations, but it's not really parsing the raw input. It's like recognizing the syntax tree and turning it into a richer representation of it. Macros is again a module. Go on, let's try that. Let's put this into the namespace. Feersum compiler services dot binding. Then this is all fine because it's types. Then we can have, well, there's a few privates. Let's just make the whole thing a module from there on down. We have module macros. Shifted badly there. And now I've got to select everything again. We'll find out what this breaks. Probably the binder. Yeah. We get rid of, if we go to the libraries, change this to binding as well. Yeah, that must be binding. Just find everything where it says compiler services libraries. Oh, there is only one place. Okay. And let's do make libraries the actual module. So try open. Mabel one says, apologies, my communication performance was temporarily compromised due to biological needs. Meaning I couldn't type on my phone while I was on the toilet. Also, we've got a spammer. What? I know, exactly. How about we just ban them? Been around since January 2021, though. The spam bot thing has been around since January 2021. You'd have thought that it would have been. Yeah, you'd have thought it would have been dead by now. Macros. Macro apply. And what else we got? We've already got reference to binding, so that should be good. Like most of these things just want the types, not the actual like static methods in the module. So we'll just consolidating things down into fewer namespaces should be a good thing. And the macro tests, of course. How could we forget about you? And we probably also want binding.macros as well, so that we can just access everything in that module. Is that going to get rid of all this red in one go? No. Well, what is it actually complaining about? The pattern discriminator constant is not defined. Is that why it was higher up? It was an ordering thing. Yep, looks like it was. We must have some records where we've got the same label, and depending on which order you import them in, depends on whether or not you end up with the something from macros. Oh, it'll be because it was constant. It's a pattern versus syntax knows. So I think a syntax constant is it comes from more than one place. We could have solved that by making this require qualified access. But if we can do it just by ordering, then I guess that works. What's next? Scope. Scope should be pretty easy. Is that jinxed it? Scope. Again, it's a module. It should be a namespace. Compiler services. I think you could just live in compiler services. And then we can have module scope. Which contains everything else. Do we need to mark these all as public? Because that's in the base namespace, we might get away with it. Nope. Open scope in the binder. We do Feersum compiler services. That simplifies it. Then those scopes should be in scope. Scope. And yeah, I think those are just knock-on type errors there. In case you asked, maybe one says, in case you asked about the OpenGL thing, I was working on, I'm trying to make something like a simplified library for using OpenGL, trying to get the boilerplate out of it. That sounds like a good thing to try and work towards. I know that there's, I mean, it's a tricky one, defining those kind of libraries, because you're never quite sure what level of trade-off to aim for. But if you do target at the level that you would like, quite often you'll find that there's other people who would also appreciate that level of like abstraction. Are you trying to build a game with it or something? Is that compiled? Good. No, not the solution. Trouble is, every time I accidentally open the solution, I reinforce its idea that I did really want to open the solution. So it's going to take a slight break from that. We've got libraries and macros. That should be in like, we put them in binding, didn't we? Let's move them into a folder. Source. Compiler services. If we make the folder binding and move libraries macros into binding, does everything still work? Thinking of that because if we're going to move IL helpers might want to go into like compilation or something. Maybe one says, if you find me a computer that does not support OpenGL 4.6 by now, I would be very, very surprised. It's focusing on minimizing observable latency. Yeah, OpenGL 4 stuff is the stuff I was talking about not really being a thing back when I did OpenGL stuff at uni. I think it was a thing, but it hadn't filtered down into what we were being taught yet. So I know basically one person on the course actually was familiar with it, and I look so young. Well, thank you, but yeah. I think it was more that the course was right at the end of its run, and the syllabus kind of needed updating a little bit. I mean, I don't know about like nowadays. I guess you probably teach like Vulkan or something like that, wouldn't you? Rather than raw OpenGL. Isn't that the cutting edge? So IL helpers. This is just like useful stuff for the compile stuff. People one says Vulkan is scary. I mean, like what? But yeah, yeah, the control and the pipeline stuff looked quite nice. The idea of being able to like properly support those kind of like render transforming like into being like a pipeline, like almost as if it was like a middleware pipeline for a web service or something like that, which is kind of useful because if you think about it, you've got loads of things that would want to hook in and just do something else, like the Steam overlay and things like that. Being able to just have them as part of a pipeline, so it does seem like it would be a good idea. Mabel says, inexperienced take on it is that Vulkan is for those who want an extra 10% performance over OpenGL. There's probably quite a lot of people who want 10%, but also it's not really something that you would tackle if you were just on your own or something. I mean, my experience of it was mainly from looking at what the Volcano library does in Rust rather than actually ever dealing with the raw. It's a C++ API, I think, isn't it? So IL helpers, let's move these. Because do we want to make a directory for compilation? Because we've got lower. I mean, lower is kind of. This is really not. The lower module really is all about capture conversion and stuff. So maybe that should be in binder capture conversion instead. Compile. This is huge and probably wants to be in separate things. So maybe, I mean, we call emit a lot. Emit is a very commonly used word in this. So maybe there should be a namespace compile, and this should be the emit module in that namespace, which would make IL helpers also in the compile namespace. So I've talked myself into it. So we take that, we paste it, and we take that, paste it. This wants to be compile IL helpers. Yeah. Mono. I mean, there was going to come a time when we needed it. So that's not happy because mono was missing. But we changed this to a namespace as well. Do it need to be a namespace? There's no types in here. It could just be a module. Could I make it a private module? Maybe. I think now we won't be able to make it a private module until we move the rest of the compilation stuff in here. But let's put a to-do comment there. Should probably be private. Question mark. Just to get the true mixture of emotions. Module lower. What are you upset about? Storage ref does not support. Well, where does storage ref come from? Why is that suddenly a problem? Compile IL. Yeah, like that. That, in theory, should be the only place that references the IL helpers. Because that's why I want to make them private. built-ins. Why does built-ins reference the IL helpers? Well, only. So they've got make host instance generic. Is that in IL helpers? It is, but it doesn't. It doesn't really. It's not really an IL helper, is it? These mono helpers? I guess they are. So compile mono helpers. So that should solve that. Bind is now happy. Built-ins. How about like that? And then also we should really rename this to be mono helpers. It's just like grab bag of things for working with monotypes at the moment. Well, that's yeah. Unfortunate. Need to actually rename it here as well. If I'd have done that in the Ionide menu, things would have gone better. What was Lower unhappy about? Lower was unhappy because of storage ref. Where was storage ref? Storage ref is in bind, isn't it? Yeah, it must have been a type thing. It's also like kind of this built-in stuff. I mean, the built-ins is just way off course from where it originally started. I mean, we should probably split this into several things, but we'll wait until we get to it. Binder is next. The question is, with binder being next, should the binder live a little higher up? What does scope? Scope just has an entries, there's nothing in here that's specific to the types that go into the scope. So I think we can move scope up. And we can make this binding binder. And then we can move that into here, rename it binder. Some of these could probably also be moved. So like bound literal, bound formal, storage ref, global type. These are all really the tree. So I reckon we can move them into a new file called like bound tree. Let's see what compiles though, before we start moving namespaces. Come on. Problem with editing the base library every single time is that a whole host of the tree needs to be rebuilt. So if it compiles, yeah, let's change this to be namespace. Let's copy. Now, what are you unhappy about? They just look like utility functions. Can we just move them in here? Bind formals. All of these privates could probably be a module, couldn't they? There's this huge mutually recursive bind function. Let's do module binder. And then we can make an auto open private module for the rest of this stuff. Oh, module private. So if I make that, what have we got left? So binding context needs to be public and mangle name. So we can make that public because it's fine because it's in the private. It's fine because it's in the private library, so module now. So and then binding context. Come on, squirrels. Mangle name is not defined, but did we not just make it defined? Where is it? No. Ah, because it's binder context. But yes, binder CTX. Well, what's gone wrong here? Where are all these errors? Compile. Yeah. See. Kind of want all those like storage ref and trees and things like that to all be just types in the namespace, and then I can move them into separate files and start cutting down on the size a little bit. Well, is that fewer errors? What? There must be something else stopping it. Probably this. You already have reference to that. What about lower? Kind of, we do want lower to be in binding in the future as well. Storage ref is not defined. Yeah, but it will be. Don't worry. Is that a few errors? Oh, yeah, look, I don't even have to scroll that much. Scope from libraries. Think. Getting close. So they're all in compile. So yeah, I think that scope from libraries is because we need to do binder dot scope from libraries. Binder dot empty scope. Binder dot bind. And then hopefully that lower will just go away when the type for bound ends up being known. Also, the qualifier is redundant in diagnostics. Storage ref will be defined, don't you worry. Right, because it's in binder storage ref. And probably, yeah, we want to move these types into bound tree, don't we? There, go on, let's do that now. New file. That, and then in the binder, we want to get rid of the types. And then here we want to do bound tree. Starting to group these things by which part of the compiler they're in does start to show how for some reason this compile mono helpers is here in between some of the binding stuff. Like, does that want to go later? Does it really need to be that early in the list of files? This expression was expected to have type bound expression, but here it has type AST node kind. This is because we have the whole of the syntax in here. That might be the best way. And then we can do probably we do open syntax dot ast node kind as sin kind. Actually, we can just leave it as AST node kind. Maybe? Problem here is that we're still getting some clashes. Now we're not explicitly having the types declared here. These open statements are overwriting with similarly named types. AST node, oh, it's going to be in syntax. Kind of looks like AST node kind is. It's going to be because it is not really. It's not really a type namespace because it's a generic type. Maybe. That's a lot better. Oh, it's just because it's complaining about it. As is equals. It might be the other way around. Unexpected symbol. Yeah, well, bear with us. It's just we can't open the whole of syntax. Let's just go for every time we said AST node kind, we can go syntax dot AST node kind dot. And then we'll just find and replace. I want something that's not a dot there. Oh, let's just replace them all. And then get rid of this one I've already done. That wants to be syntax dot. Right. This was a sidetrack. Let's just get rid of it. Sometimes you just have to give up on something and come back to it at another point. There's no point continuing down that road. We can... I mean, the binder is a huge file, and I will refactor it at some point. So it compiles, stage everything before go any further. Did it again. Targets. Yep. Targets is the next up. Whoops. Come take the whole line, please. Where does targets want to live? Does it just live in the root namespace, I wonder? So the targets is a module that's for dealing with target frameworks. It's already a namespace. Go on, let's leave it as being a namespace. Okay, and now we're getting to the point where we need this to be the one that depends on the core instead. Wow, that was a bad misspelling. Open targets. You know it's good when even I'm surprised at my own typo ability. That's not even how you spell compiler. Just copy and paste like a civilized human being. Maybe you want one of the following. Maybe I want to properly have imported you. Yeah, the target resolve stuff is a bit weak at the moment. It would be nicer if we, like as this says, if we used, so just like we did with the runtime, there's a package, Microsoft Extensions Dependency Model. There's also a package that MS Build uses to actually find SDKs and stuff like that. So we could use that to try and work out where the core library is rather than just hard coding it to the one that we're built against. And then have a compiler switch that you can pass in when you say please target framework net5, and then it works out where net5 is. At the moment, we only really support either you passing in the core lib and then us implicitly working out which target framework you're going for based on that, which we don't really do properly and just kind of always treat it as being .NET 5 and then deal with the fact that linking against another core library kind of works. Or, yeah, we support one-shot compilation, assuming that you want to target the same version of the .NET 5 runtime that you're currently using for the compiler. But with .NET 6 coming out soon, we should probably look at improving the cross-compilation story a little bit. Does this compile again now? I mean, there was a tick there, but I don't know how old it was. And I see an awful lot of red in the tabs. Well, that worked. So, next. There you go. Didn't fall into the trap of trying to open the solution file that time. Built-ins. Built-ins is one of those ones that could really do with a rename. Let's have a look at the file first and see if we can come up with a better name for it. I mean, this is definitely a compilation thing. It's got the core types. It also deals with, well, it doesn't deal with just one kind of thing. That's part of the problem, I think. Part of the reason why it's just called built-ins. So it deals with things like loading and resolving external libraries, getting assembly names. It's also got the built-in macro definitions, which is why it was originally called built-ins. And then it has this core stuff. So core is like just a collection of method references that and type references. So this is all of the parts of our library and the MS core lib that we need to emit like lots of references to at compile time. So things like the type that we use to represent a lambda or a closure on the stack or on the heap. Sorry, and things like cons type, our actual type that we use for representing cons pairs. I guess it gets to be called built-ins for a little bit longer, and splitting it out into separate parts is a job for another day, but it does want to go into the compile part of the tree. So I guess, should targets be in compile as well? Not yet. There's nothing specific to compilation in there. So I guess we can live with it. Compile services dot compile, and then if that is a namespace, what breaks? Well, we've got core types. Add environment decals. Why does that reader params can be here in external utils because it's for dealing with external libraries. And add environment decals. I mean, there's nothing in there that's actually particularly specific. Can I just move that into the mono helpers? And we got the external utils. Load core types, which apparently was not indented properly. Is this the actual built-ins? I mean, what's this? So try get signature, get export. Let's do module built-ins. Move all these public methods into there. See how many errors we're left with. We are just left with this. So if I move this into the external utils, I mean, this doesn't need to be ahead of the macros for any reason. So we can just make it a private in here. Like that. Then what breaks? I'm seeing a lot of red in here. But here's some compiler services compile. And then we can do core types. Instead of built-in as core types, we can just use core types. That seems like an improvement. Yeah. Built-ins. That is going to be compiler services. Compile. Then what about this one in runtime? Oh no, that is the same thing. It's just a knock-on from the original error. It compiled, so I'm staging it. Next up, lower. Now, we said lower could probably be moved into binding. And could probably be called capture conversion as well. Because all it really does is capture conversion. And if we had the tree as two separate things, if we had the tree and the binder separate, we could make the lower, we could move lowering into the binder and just have it. Like we could move the different stages of binding out into their own modules and have them all just unified by the binder. Where there's at the moment we've just got this weird part where you have to pass the syntax tree through lower before it's any use, which the compiler does, but I mean, there is a type in here, but it is private. Do we want to make it module? Do I need to do that now? No one ever opened lower anyway. We're getting close. We can leave that as formals because it kind of helps stage it quick. Runtime, I guess, can just go at the root. And runtime was written fairly recently, so hopefully it can just be copied and pasted and forgotten about. It is a module, but it does just contain public things. Go on. We need dependency model moving across as well. Oops, that's gone badly. Does anyone use runtime directly? Doesn't look like it. I think we're getting to the stage now where there's enough things that have got the Feersum compiler services namespace open. Things are just working. Kind of deserve that for saying it was just going to work. We're getting towards the point where we're going to make a decision about whether or not we want to put the eval stuff in or not. I think we probably do. this should go in compile. The compile module again wants to move into separate smaller files because it's a beast, but for the time being, what did we say this was going to be called? A MIT? I'll see if it's compiled for the time being, and then I can rename it. Mabel wants this. I said no to a thing. Well, yeah, I, the collective that is me, may have suggested that it should be called a MIT. I mean, the word is used 226 times in the file. Look at all of that. It kind of feels like it deals with emitting rather than compilation as a whole. I'd argue that this should be called emit. This is the kind of thing you get to make executive decisions on. I mean, on a slightly related note, have you heard of language servers? I have. We're talking about the language server, or is it language server or language service protocol, LSP, which is defined by Microsoft. It's a standard for how editors can talk to something that knows about a language. And you can run them over HTTP or standard input, standard output. It's like a JSON RPC based protocol, I believe. And yeah, effectively you send notifications like I've hovered on something, and then you get a back message that says, oh, here's all this information about the type you've hovered on. Part of the advantage of moving to this library approach is that we will be able to do things like produce a language service and that kind of stuff. I mean, the driving factor here is that we want to be able to create like a cut down version of the compiler, because we really want like the Feersum package that you install to contain references to our fully fledged standard library, but we want a cut down version so that we can build that standard library in Scheme itself. But we could also use the same compiler services to produce things like, I think the first place that I want to go is I want to have a look at .NET Interactive support. So we should bring the eval part of the compiler across and kind of update that a little bit, because at the moment we don't support like threading state from one REPL statement to another. Does this even compile? Because if it does, I can show the REPL and its failures. But the idea would be that if we could improve the API a little bit, we could make what .NET Interactive calls a kernel, which is like a running service that you can send bits of code to and get responses back from. And that is then part way towards building a fully fledged language service, because that would support some of the things like you can support diagnostics queries and stuff like that. So we'd be able to support doing some of the work for that would then prepare us for actually writing a language service. It should be super nice if you could you didn't have to compile the scheme to even start getting the errors. I did not rename the module yet. Go on, I'm feeling brave. Don't need to open the namespace. And then this can just be utils. Make it auto open. It's private, private, private. Get field. Some of these things, like emit method to, yeah. There's a whole bunch of this that could be factored out into another file. So emit expression, then I think. And all of the other ands. So each of these are the different kinds of nodes in our syntax tree. We just have a huge recursive function that deals with it. And then emit. See, we've got the compile and the emit. Let's let's make it, instead of an auto open, let's make it let's just move all of that right down to the emit, to the compile and emit bit into a module. Then this can be the main module then. Compilation, because compiler kind of feels weird to have a module called compiler. Yeah, compilation compile file sounds a bit better. Library type attributes. Make that public. What else have we got failing down here? This is it's such a huge file that Visual Studio can't even render the whole scroll bar for this little like mini map view thing in one thing. Yes, emit name lambda. Markers to be debuggable, mark compilation relaxations. This one. Emit named lambda. Why is that private? Does that want to be like that? Probably. What else we got going on down here? Compilation relaxations. That's explicitly marked as private. I guess when you have mutually recursive functions and you're using AND, it must take whatever the visibility was of the first thing. Main epilogue markers compiler generated. No, don't need to search the whole solution. Yeah. How about now? Over one says modern editors' performance is abysmal. News at 11. Well, I mean, it's a trade-off, isn't it? I'd like it if it performed better by not telling me the amount of code was so full of errors. Why? What? But is this not marked? Did I not mark this as auto open? Is that a problem? Where is the module started? Yeah. Always got to have your utils modules auto open. And that doesn't need to be public because it's implicitly public. That's a far more acceptable number of errors. Markers compiler generated. Yep, I can understand you not being able to see it. This could definitely do with being picked apart into several different things. I wonder how many lines it actually is. Let's see how good this Logitech scroll wheel is. Only 1,157 lines. That wants to be Feersum compiler services compile. Then that can be compilation.compile. That should all work. That should be the eval stuff. And then program wants to be compilation.compile files, and you must already know. Can I move system all the way up to there? Apparently so. Tests. The tests also use the compiler. They just want this adding on the front. And then there'll be a bit where they call emit or compile file. Which could be compilation dot. Is that it? Apparently so. Quick with the stage. And then I think we are down to the last thing that we want to move, which is eval. So eval. What do we need to do here? I guess it can just be, I can deal with it being a module for the moment. Because there's nothing really that interesting in there. Just need to fix up the usings. Now people are actually going to be able to use, like, see this stuff. Do need to use namespaces. Why is it called Feersum? Because that would be interpret, surely. Must have meant something back when I wrote it. I do remember we used to have two separate evaluators here, because we used to have one for the old tree walk interpreter. Is expect okay the same thing as results ex dot unwrap? I think so. Stage it. Right. Now we're down to the point where the only thing in Feersum is the program, which has the command line argument passing. Reads for the REPL. Print is for the REPL. REPL is for the REPL. Compile all. This is because we need a way to separate out the emitting of the diagnostics from the compiling. So at the moment we have this dump diagnostics. Let's Run the REPL. We could probably separate the REPL out. Let's do that next. Hello, can you refresh? Oh, no, there you go. REPL. And then we'll move all of this into it. So we can have the command line argument passing can still be in here. So read, print, and REPL can all go into the REPL module. Yeah, so you need AST node, and then also run REPL. Which might become the only public thing. And AST node. Let's just copy. So we want syntax, and probably want syntax and evaluation in the REPL. So it needs to be let rec private, not let private rec. We want to open read line maybe? Nope. Guess dump diagnostics. Could dump diagnostics be moved into the diagnostics namespace? What does it do? We do use dump diagnostics in 2 places. Let's move it in here. What? Probably, yeah. Probably do want to say the changes, but why are you prompting me? Dump diagnostics. That should work again now. Compile. This could probably do with being moved into the compilation module. I'm also wondering about whether or not we want to move the arguments into a place where they could be shared between the stage 1 compiler and the rest of it. But for the time being, I think if this works, we'll commit this and then we'll move on to trying to produce a stage 1 compiler, which might require another cup of tea. So REPL isn't happy because it needs diagnostics and read line. What did the program used to do? Program used to just call read line, right? Version. We need a version library, a version module as well. And then the version string and print version can go in there. REPL should then open this version. Why are you still not happy about read line? Is this just going to be something that's going to go away? Because read line should be coming from the read line library, which we still reference. Right? REPL. So there's 2 failed references to read line. Print version. Yeah, that needs to be... it's not open then, let's just do version. Do I need to open read line maybe? That made it worse. Yeah. Namespace read line is not found. Read line. That must be version up version. What did we know? What was the actual error? REPL. Just open it, because otherwise I'd have to do Feersum.REPL, which is a pain. Scientific version. Nope, not a new. Number one says, I might have asked you before, but is Visual Studio Code more comfortable for you versus full? I guess you're talking about proper VS. And has very good refactoring, inspections, and debugging capabilities. I like code. It's all I need, to be honest. That's where I feel more at home now. I mean, I appreciate that Visual Studio can do more, but a lot of the time I'm just used to doing it all manually anyway, so I don't really gain a huge amount. And I find that it just feels clunky and sluggish, and I guess, and yeah, I'd much rather be running VS Code on Linux or Mac OS than having to bother booting up Visual Studio. I think, like, I guess about the only thing I would use Visual Studio for would be like the parallel stacks tasks view, if I have to use that to debug something, but that is a very rare occurrence. Most of the time, Visual Studio Code's all you really need. Well, it's all I really need. Doesn't mean it's all you really need. Why is readline not defined? Package references. Ooh, Mac OS indeed. I use Mac OS at work as my primary operating system, and I generally work by SSHing into a big server. So Visual Studio remoting, so you get the little purple thing. Well, it's purple for me because of my color scheme in the bottom left-hand corner, and you can connect. You can connect into Docker containers, but you can also connect over SSH into big machines in the cloud. What was I looking for? Yes, NuGet read line. Why is this just suddenly stopped working? Can I still access it from here? They're not defining it or anything. So it is available in this module. Is it any of these? You what? How is that even a thing? Readline's not a Microsoft thing. Someone's done a foul thing and polluted the namespace, haven't they? The answer is yes, they have. The readline library has a static class called readline in the system namespace. It works though. I would totally have preferred it if it didn't, but there we go. Program. Get rid of some of this stuff. System IO. What are we still using system IO for? Who knows? Right. Commit, I think, while it still builds. Split, compiler, and compiler services. Spelt it wrong there. Move core compilation into a separate library. This paves the way. Paves the way for a cut down stage 1 compiler to compile. So that's that. I guess the next step would be creating the executable for stage 1, which Mabel one says streams, files, enumerating file system. Yeah, I mean, I believe that I'm using it because it's not grayed out, but I was just curious as to what I was doing. Oh, we got path as well. There's a whole load of path stuff going on in here. So let's. Oh, the compiler services. The first thing we should probably do is steal some of the props from in here. Well, I mean, we just want our own title and description because I'm thinking packaging. So this probably wants to have its own title and description. That doesn't need a second. That's why I was. This is going to be Feersum theme compiler services library. Contains what does it contain? Contains the compiler used by that'll do for now. The other thing packaging wise, and the reason why I was reminded of it, is that we want to... We probably want to not pack this. So .NET new class lib language shop. No, not that. But it doesn't matter. We can just copy all of the props over. So whoops. Stage 1. So output type exe. We don't need a package tool. We don't need a tool command name. Don't need a title or description. In fact, we also want to say is packable false. So we don't want to produce a package. And then this can be program, and this can be program. Then what else we got going on here? Got the command line parsing stuff. I don't know how much of this we want to copy. Grabber says, have you any resources on how to make a custom SDK? Well, I have a few links. Let me dig into my bookmarks over here and I'll see what I can do. But mainly, I found there is an IL Proj SDK. Microsoft something IL Proj. That was a good place to base things off. And bookmarks. I was completely overlooking my programming language folder here. So the SDK I was talking about was this one. And then these two links, probably the best place to start. What did you ever regret sticking with computers and coding? No. I enjoy myself, which is all that really matters. Where are we? .NET. Let's add this to the solution. Yes, well, I mean, it's nothing like solution. It's nothing like .NET apparently either. That's also nothing like .NET. Oh dear. There's a cat. You want to get down now? Yeah, well. Careful I don't run over your tail. Number one says, thanks for asking the question, but also playing the guitar. I have a motorcycle. Doubles with electronics. I mean, you sound very interesting. Our boy says he's planning on making a custom extensible compiler, and an SDK would be really useful. It would. And now it's in the past. Now it's something that's been achieved. I'm quite happy with how it all turned out. I think having interesting hobbies, Mabel, is how you become interesting, right? Is that the line we're going with? And yeah, building your extensible compiler sounds interesting. Where were we? Oh yeah, program. I was gonna copy the entry point stuff. Like this. Like that. Namespaces cannot contain values. Well, that should probably just not be a namespace then, shouldn't it? If we print out all of our arguments, that'll be the first place to go. Everyone says you only become interesting if you are able to present or describe your hobbies in a pleasant manner. So yeah, if you just like scream in someone's face, I play guitar, pay attention to me. Yeah. I think that's when you end up being a creep instead. Just chasing down these red squiggles. This one doesn't even have any red files in. So we've got the, where are we at with things depending on other things? Compiler services depends on the Shrifa library. Fearsum depends on compiler services, and what we wanted to be able to do is make it also depend on core. And to do that, we need to break the link between core and the main compiler. So can we do a condition? No, probably not. let's copy and paste this whole thing. So we've got the use local compiler. I'm just gonna, this is our props file for so we can change this to use stage 1 compiler. So use local compiler carries on doing what it's doing, but also adds a reference to its core. And stage 1 changes this to be fearsum.stage 1. And the output directory needs to be stage 1 bin compiler blah 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 stage 1, and then core.csproj can do use, and if we have done that correctly, this should build. Boy says he's found a library for extensible parsing. The plan is to make a pluggable compiler from the customer language or C#. I haven't decided yet. The architecture is planned like Roslyn. So you have a VS extension and analyzers and code fixes. I mean, it sounds cool. What is the library that you found for parsing? People says if you Google GTSIRS you will find a toy language. Let's have a look. Let's take a sidetrack. Looks like you haven't used it for a while, but I want to see, is there any example source code anywhere? Things that it can compile. This looks quite a lot like it be a language that's quite good for that kind of code golf stuff. Lost the password for the account. Oh dear. Just have to create a new GitHub account and fork it yourself. What are all these warnings doing? Oh, I know. It's this one up here. There, because this is not a CS proj. It is a SCM proj. Kind of feels like that should have been more of an error than it actually turned out to be. Maybe no. for the time being. Oh dear, this tale of lost password is really getting quite complex. It's like quite a deep level of yak shaving required to gain access again. And the 3 asterisks is because it's been a URL that's been hidden, I believe. And I've not got the moderator view open, so I can't. So, our compiler at the moment is generating this stuff. So it's all these core libs and references. Do we want to bother properly parsing them? Go on, let's do it. So I'll just go steal the command line parsing from here. And we'll bring in argue as well. So stage 1 wants a reference to the type by arguments. It wants to probably wants to reference the same version. Argue. There's a cardboard box down there if you can hear mystery rustling. The cat is investigating that and the lighting system. Everyone says I hate Twitch's emojis so much. Yeah, I mean, I agree. They're not the best. I think you can change them. There's like 3 different schemes now that you can use. The default is that robot one. Boy says he's implemented an expression evaluator with the library. Yeah, I don't know if that's only on the app on iOS though. The reference project. Which one? Where's that coming from? It's a reference to Feersum core FS proj. Where have I typoed this? in the main compiler. Program.fs in stage 1. Yeah, we need argue in scope here. And we need a reference to our main compiler library. No, what? No, what? Never. Feersum compiler services. So that should get build configuration, output type, and that kind of stuff. But why are we still not getting argue? I mean, it kind of looks like it's there. Maybe you'll just feel better about yourself when it's recompiled. Maybe one says that apparently the different emojis are for Twitch Prime, and they don't have Twitch Prime, which is totally understandable. After all, Amazon are the worst, but also being Prime's quite good. Why is this so hard? Surely you can just C2 compiling this code, right? Right. So we don't have a REPL or a version. We don't use the diagnostics, and we don't use compile yet. Well, let's leave diagnostics and compile it in there because we're probably going to end up wanting to use them. Arguments, down stage 1 compiler options. So rather than kind of trying to share the same type, we don't need to support all of the different things. So I think I'm just going to get rid of the bits that we don't think we need. So we'll probably want a configuration, a calllib path. The generate deps flag, is that being passed in? Don't know. Then how about the actual command line pass? Is that going to build now? I think they're old warnings. So then we want to do parser create. And then this whole build configs. Stuff. And then should we just print the options we've produced? With any luck, this will produce what's, maybe we wanted one of the following. Where are we? Error handler. Well, we can just ignore the errors. Well, we've got a lot of references. Generate depths, files false. Output type is library. Configuration is debugs. Kind of looks good. And then what we'd want to do is something like compilation dot compile files. What does this take? It takes an options and it takes an output, which would be args get result output path. Is that right? Or is it just output? It's just output. And probably then take sources, which is going to be options args dot get results sources. And that is completely not anywhere near working. So get result. Yeah, options output files. Ah, not enough. Not enough tuples. Then you're upset because that returns the list of diagnostics. Has errors, diags, diagnostics. So otherwise, we return 0. And I guess we can return diags. Length is the exit code. What are you upset about? Stringless list. Get result then. How about now? Is this going to build? One thing I do know is that we do have one diagnostic that is generated at the moment in the core library because our compilation warns if you use scheme at the start of your library name, as the standard suggests you should, but interesting. Let's just get rid of all of the compilation results. And try and rebuild it. Find out whether or not it genuinely works. Positive. And so now if we go to the REPL, what we want here is for the REPL to be able to see stuff that we've put into the Feersum core. So we do that with eval. Yeah, so kind of want a way of injecting a compilation options. Well, let's just say options, and then extract this. Oh, we want we want the thing that doesn't contain the compilation options to still be called eval, and we want the one that does to be called eval with, and then we can do this point free because why not? We're professional functional programmers here. Is there anything in options that could give us a good name, base name for that library as well? No, not really. That's okay though. And then in the REPL, we can say well, we'll make an options. We'll move this into something that we can then just extend. This is the default set of options for scripting. I think at some point we're gonna have like actual evaluators, and so like we'll create an evaluator with some options, and then we'll call eval on that rather than having just a module with some methods in it. Options is going to be default script options. We can do a with expression. With references. We want to reference the Feersum core. So type of I think that's it. What is it? Type of assembly dot location. Surely that's the string, right? Yeah, it is. Val with options. And then set this to the REPL. Let's see whether or not we end up with anything. So we're at our prompt. Can I do import scheme base? Yes. Import bad. Import scheme CXR. Interesting. Just end up with what? The last thing that was produced by the library body? So it's just random junk. If I have a look at the CXR library. No, the library, not the tests. If I changed that to be like hello world, and then we stopped the REPL and restarted it, would we end up with hello world if I did import CXR? Import scheme CXR. Yes, we just get whatever the last thing was. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the value of importing a library is, I suppose. It's just a bit odd. But then can we do the... Well, I mean... The REPL doesn't really support... Yeah. We'll take the car. So 2 A's of a list containing one. And then that should correctly produce one. But if I did like CA DR we end up with an exception. Nice. Which should then be printed in the REPL. I mean, it's not the world's greatest, but I think that's that. Add stage 1 compiler, I guess. Let's have a look at what the changes are. We've added the new project to the solution. Yeah, cleaned up the use local compiler. Added the stage 1 props file. Added the core library to the main compiler. Open Feersum core. Eval now has a with options, so we can pass in the references. And yeah, we want to back that change out because that's just going to cause test failures. Because it'll change what things evaluate to. We've got the new stage 1 compiler. Yeah. This cut down compiler be used to compile the standard library. And I think that's it for today. So thanks for watching, and if you don't mind sticking around, a friend of mine is doing a 24-hour live stream, so we're just gonna go on a quick raid there.